Hello, dear viewer or viewers. Welcome back again to another Dream Entry ASMR. This one might be the last one I do today. This one's titled 2 O'Clock Rush, written circa 12 or December of 2021. I woke in my room at my parents' house. As I checked the time, it read 2 o'clock. But as I looked out the window, it looked like it was dark out. I wasn't sure what time it was, but in a panic, I rushed to get dressed. Everything just seemed off. Like everything seemed disorganized and out of place. The time didn't seem right. As I rummaged through trying to find a belt, I noticed I already had a belt, although it didn't seem like a belt I had ever worn. I didn't give it much thought, and in a daze, I finished getting dressed. I looked around the rest of the room, tried tidying things up. I went to pick up a glass of tea. The glass itself was green, and it resembled one of those old ball jars, although it had a handle. As I picked it up, tea splashed all over the table. It seemed that the bottom part of the glass had broken off. Me Sorry about that. Me, slightly annoyed and disgusted at this point, I told myself I would clean it up later. I looked out the window again, still dark and now pitch black out. I noticed the Christmas lights looking down at the ground. I started drifting off in thought, and as I daydreamed, I found myself being teleported to these places in my thoughts. Somehow I was drifting in and out of these places. First it was a backstage area where I heard the band members of Coldplay giving an interview, and next I was being teleported to these colorful, Christmassy, festive worlds. I had awoke from my gaze, finding myself staring down at this stream of red, or the stream of light coming from a window below me. It was a red crimson in color and partially illuminated the ground outside. I woke again in my room at my parents'. This time it was daylight out. Confusion starts to set in again. I tried to reach for my phone, and although I can feel it, but I can't see it. The dream started taking a turn toward confusion and delirium. Every time I would try to wake up, I would drift in and out of consciousness. I would find myself laying in bed awake, but I could tell at this point I was still in a dream. The dream did end finally. Okay, so this was a trippy dream because it just was one of them dreams where I could not wake up. It was almost like the dream was forcing me to stay into this dream world, or this perpetual state of wake and sleep. And I feel like at one point I did end up waking up into like that whole sleep paralysis episode, but I had a blanket over my head, and so I tried several times to get the blanket off my face in the dream, and I just couldn't. I was so frustrated that this blanket was still covering my view of the outside world. And I was so frustrated that I was trying to get this blanket off my face. I don't know if anybody has experienced this. I'm sure people have experienced this in some degree or some dream, but I couldn't get the blanket off my face. And I was so frustrated. And that was towards the end of the dream when I started waking up and I started feeling like I was claustrophobic and I was starting to like feel like I was suffocating. But I had soon woke up at that point. But during the dream itself, it was trippy because it felt like I was actually awake, and it felt like it was a very real lucid dream. And I remember the theme or the thing that I was most focused on was trying to see the time on my phone and trying to get ready. And it's weird because I wasn't working at the time, so I really had no place to be. But I still had that years of working before my accident. I had that ingrained into me to where I was freaking out for being late to work at a place I apparently worked at, but I wasn't at the time. And I guess my dream self was like, oh, I gotta go to work, and I gotta be up at this certain time. I'm frantically getting ready, and then the uh, the crazy part where it's nighttime and then all of a sudden it's daytime, and it's like my mind was like playing tricks on me, like changing the time of day and shit, and then keep me from seeing my phone, seeing the time. And it's very interesting because I think it drives home the point of how unimportant time actually is and how much of an illusion it is. And it's like we get so caught up in looking at the clocks on our phones, or looking at the time and trying to make sure. And I'm bad about this. Like I get I get so paranoid and so worked up sometimes about being on time, or being at a certain place at a certain time. And I'm sure a lot of people are like this, or trying to stay on time in my life and trying to do things that don't take up, try and plan things throughout the day at certain times of the day. And it's like when those things don't fall through, like for instance, me trying to keep up on my YouTube channel, or trying to keep up on my job, and trying to keep up on many other things in my life. And I just get upset because I can't do everything that I want to do in 24 hours of a day, but I'm not awake for 24 hours of the day. Like, I try to sleep at least 6 or 7 hours a day. And realistically, we're supposed to be sleeping at least 7 or 8 hours. And so, that gives us maybe 16 hours of the day. That gives us 16 hours for work. Whether we work 8, 10, or 12 hours, depending on how long you work. For me, I work 10 hours when I go to work. And I'll be there. I'll be there from, I don't know, I'll go in 6:30 in the evening, and I'll get back usually around 5 in the morning. And I don't go to sleep right away. I usually give myself at least a half an hour. I'll watch maybe an ASMR video and it'll, try and get to sleep. So realistically, it's like close to 6 in the morning by the time I finally get to sleep. And I'll try and wake up usually around 1 in the afternoon. So that way it gives me at least some time to do things before I go to work. And I've been trying to get into this routine where I'll maybe go to the gym for like an hour before work. And I try to plan out enough time to get ready for work after I get back from the gym. And also give myself plenty of time to get to work. So I like to try to leave the house by around 5:30 in the afternoon. Even though I have to be at work by 6:30, I still have to leave an hour early. So that way it gives me plenty of time for traffic, dealing with traffic, rush hour and all that fun stuff. But that's the thing though, is we live in such a crazy society that time seems so important, yet it's not though. It's really, when we look back to the hunter-gatherer periods in human existence, people didn't have a certain time that they got up and went and hunted for food. I mean, yeah, there were certain things, like, if they were hungry, they would, go hunt for food at that point, or they get low on food, they would hunt for it. And maybe certain things like that, or maybe there was like, they could tell when the sun came up, and they'd have so many hours of sunlight, and then the sun would go down, and they'd go to sleep. But that was it. There were no clocks back then. There was no a way to really tell time other than looking outside and, hey, the sun's up. Let's go hunt for food. Or maybe after they got back hunting, maybe they kept up on their tools and they made sure that things were good to go for the next day. Basic survival stuff, keeping up on like their huts, if they built like huts or something like that, or kept up on stuff like that. There's only so much you can do, though, and I need to catch back up on that show. But I used to watch that show alone, and people would go out, and they might still do it. They might still do new episodes, because my parents have been watching it. But people will go out and they will go to like some of the most remote places on Earth, and there'll be a bunch of people that will go, but they will be spread out, like either by like mountain chains or like lakes and stuff, so they won't be able to like walk to each other, and they'll be several miles apart from each other. So they're pretty much on their own. And it's just interesting to watch because it's like in an extreme survival situation. You don't know how a person's going to act. And it's crazy because a lot of the people, especially on the first season, a lot of the people who are on there are hardened to like war veterans and stuff that go home within like the first week or first few days of being out completely alone and in a survival situation. And it just goes to show that even the most hardened people can break down in extreme survival situations. This has nothing to do with time that I was originally talking about, but I'm going off on tangents a lot on these videos. And I really don't mean to. But, yeah, I don't know. just something I found was interesting about the whole time situation and about how it didn't actually come up. Clocks weren't a thing until maybe the Renaissance or something like that. I don't even know if they had clocks back then. I mean, I'm sure they probably had like certain ways to tell time at that time. But yeah, it's just funny to think that it's such a prominent thing in our society now. But back in like the hunter gatherer days, it wasn't an important thing to think about at the time. It was more survival and making sure that you were gonna make it to the next day back then. But anyways, I hope you enjoy me rambling and talking about my dreams and stuff. I will try and see if I can get on Reddit again and see if I can get more people's stories on the channel and stuff. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.